Good afternoon, all. I'm happy to introduce today's speaker as she has been a mentor to me and has directly influenced my success. Neha Pathak is an intellectual property attorney currently based in Minneapolis. Thank you for being with us today, Neha.
Thank you, Yavna. Hi everyone. My name is Neha Pathak. I actually currently work as an intellectual property attorney at a law firm called Fogg and Powers. I have been with the firm for about 2.5 years now, right after I graduated from law school. And today I'll be talking a little bit about how I got to this point and a lot of the tests I had to take along the way to get here, and also pretty much just what my journey has been like. Because as you can see from my title here, I took more than just one direction in life. So I took a lot of different directions and made my own path to get where I am. So let's moving on to the next slide. This is just a little bit of an agenda of what we're going to be talking about today. It's pretty much about me, who I am, where I was, and how I got to this point. Again, as I said, I took a different directions than what other people, my friends, were doing at that point, and I sort of created my own path. It took me a little bit longer, but I'm really happy where I am right now. So where I am right now, I'm in Minneapolis. I am originally from Chicago, and then I moved to Milwaukee, and then I live in Minneapolis now. Apparently, the cold was not cold enough for me in Chicago, so I kept moving up north. But this is, again, currently Minneapolis. That's just the skyline of Minneapolis, in case you guys were wondering. It's located at the edge of the Mississippi River, pretty much, I think, where it starts. But I actually grew up in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. So I was there until I was 14, and then we moved to Chicago when I was about to start high school. So it's quite a bit of a move. It seems like such a long time ago, but there were a lot of cultural differences that I had to cope up with. I moved from a school I had been in from like first grade to ninth grade. I had all my friends there, and you just pick everything up. You move. It's a lot harder for a teenager than one can expect. I'm sure a bunch of you here listening to this can probably relate to that. So I moved to Niles West. It was a different culture. There were different things to cope up with. The examination structure was way different from what you expect. There were extracurricular activities like math team, science Olympiad, that we just weren't expected to be a part of when I was in Dubai. But once I moved to Niles West in Chicago, my high school, you sort of were expected to be part of these extracurricular activities so that they look good on your resume. And again, one of the major differences, yes, there were exams, like we had midterm tests, which was different because we never had to take midterm tests back in Dubai. We just had one exam at the end of each semester, and that was it. But also standardized tests and AP classes. I had never taken a multiple choice exam before, and that's pretty much what you do when you're taking a standardized test. So a lot of places just offer the SATs, but in Illinois, they also offer the ACT. I'm not really sure what New York does, but I think SATs are pretty much offered nationwide. I did take the SATs, but I actually used my ACT scores to be able to I submitted my ACT scores for college. I just think I did a little bit better on my ACTs than I did on my SATs. Also, SAT has penalized grading system. So if you guess something incorrectly, if you have an incorrect answer for something, they'll penalize you. ACT does not have that, so it's just a little bit better with ACT. I'm just going to interrupt for a second here. I think I'm having a little problem with connection, so I might have to just control. Yagna, can you control this? Can you control my slides for me? Hello?
Sure. Do you want me to move on to the next slide?
Yeah, because I think in the last 5 minutes I've had like trouble connecting at least twice, so I think it might just be better if you connect.
Sure.
Control me.
So we're on slide 5 right now, and we're moving on to slide 6.
Yeah. So some of the things you have to, I'm just going to go briefly into what sections they have on the SATs or the ACTs and how you can prepare for each of these sections. And this I'm talking from personal experience, how I have prepared for pretty much all of the standardized tests that I've taken through my journey. And as you will see, I have taken a lot. So I'm really talking from experiences that I've had and mistakes that I have learned from. So one of the first, for the SATs, you will have 3 sections. There's math, reading, and writing. What I can tell you about math, and math was my strongest section. It always has been. The most important thing to do is pay attention in class and do your homework. Don't be scared of math, because if you're scared of math, you're never going to be able to get to the correct answer. And at least with math, there is just one correct answer. I know with reading and writing as well, they ask you to pick the best answer, but with math, it's not just about the best answer, it's the correct answer. There is only one correct answer. There are many ways to get to that correct answer, and that's why you have to pay attention in class, because they will teach you the ways to get to that correct answer. And if you have a strong foundation, that is less guesswork on math, and guesswork does not work when it comes to math section. So you really have to pay attention to all of your homework and build that strong foundation. And trust me, I know a lot of times people ask you, how is math ever going to help me in life? But trust me, even though I'm a lawyer, math still helps me. The second section is reading. You will have a bunch of long sections to read. The best way you can prepare for the reading section is just constantly have reading material with you. Even if you are just waiting in line for something, if you just quickly have a book or something, just keep some reading material with you. Or even on your smartphone, just pick an article that's a little long and maybe a little tedious to read. And if you just read through it, the more you read, the faster you get. And that is a key on the reading section. You have to be able to get through that passage as quickly as you can so that you can get to the question. And that will only come with constant reading. The third section is writing and language. Now, I am not sure, when I took the SATs, it was not computer-based. And also when I took the LSAT, that's the law school standardized exam, we have a writing section on that too. That was also not computer-based. So I'm not really sure how SATs are right now. I did recently read an article where they were talking about switching it so that it's not computer-based. If it is computer-based, you just have to ask people to read your passages, get people's opinions on what you think it is. That maybe your teacher, that maybe your guidance counselor, someone who has, had experience with this. If it isn't computer-based, one of the best things to do is practice writing by hand as much as possible, because the more you write, that is also timed. So the more you write, the more you get used to it, and the less you have to worry about being haphazard on when you're actually in the exam, doing the exam. And also, the more you practice writing by hand, the more legible your handwriting becomes. And that is always key, because if the examiner cannot, if the grader cannot read your handwriting, they're not going to be able to give you a fair grade on what you've written. So moving on to the next slide, if you could, Yavna. Please let me know when you have, because it's a little hard for me to tell.
We're on slide 7.
We're on slide 7. Okay, so slide 7, preparation is key. So here I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can prepare for your SATs or your ACTs, or for that matter, any other standardized tests that you would ever have to take. There are a lot of study guides and courses available for you to take. I personally did not take any courses when I was studying for my SATs and ACTs, and I also did not take any courses when I was studying for my LSAT. But what I did instead was I worked on, I went to Barnes & Noble pretty much every day. I spent a lot of time there working, through the Princeton Review, Kaplan, Barron's. Those are all the different companies that offer you these study guides with actual tests that you can take. They offer explanation of the answers, so you can go ahead and take a look at what you did right, what you did wrong. So I think those study guides are very helpful. One of the main things you have to do is please go back and look at what you got wrong, and not just what you got wrong, but also what you got right, and see whether your explanation for getting to that point was correct or not. Because sometimes it may have worked for that particular question, but that may not be the right reasoning, so it may not work when you try to take a similar, when you have a similar question on your test again. So just, if you get something right, at least quickly skim through the answer to see whether the explanation makes sense and whether that was the rationale you used. And if you get something wrong, or if you have just guessed on an answer, you definitely have to go back and take a look at it. If you feel like you can do this by yourself, there are a lot of free or reduced rate courses offered by college prep organizations. Please feel free to take advantage of all of them. When I was taking my LSATs, I know Kaplan Review course offered timed tests that they would offer once every 2 months, and during my preparation, I went and took every single one of them, just because sometimes when you are timing yourself, you may not be as accurate as you are when there's someone in a test environment that is actually testing you. Plus, it gives you a little bit of a feel of what it's going to be like when you're in that test room. So do take advantage of, these free tests that are being offered, free mock tests that are being offered by these college prep organizations, or these review courses, or, just any of that. You can probably find which of these are being offered. You can find them online and see if there are any close to where you live. The third thing is taking online tests and flashcards. Now, if this is a paper exam, I would suggest you print out these online tests if possible, and actually fill them out by hand. That way you are more close to what it's actually going to be like when you're in that test room. You can also use flashcards. Personally, for me, I didn't really use a lot of flashcards, but I think they work for a lot of people. A lot of my friends used it. And I think they also have apps for making these flashcards now, or I think these flashcards may just be available through apps. So please take advantage of all of these things that you have. The next point here that I have is one of the other things you have to do in order to be prepared for taking a test is be proactive in your approach. That is what I was talking about when I was saying that, go online and look for these review courses or these mock tests that are being offered in your city. Don't wait for someone to tell you about it later. Start this approach on your own. Do some research on your own and start early enough. So start early enough that you will have enough time to be ready by the time you end up taking a test that's actually going to count as a score that you would be submitting to a college, but not too early. So what do I mean by that? Start early enough, but not too early. So start early enough as in when you're taking your PSATs. Your PSATs do take the PSATs. They're not mandatory, but do take them. Perhaps you don't have to prepare for your PSATs because the scores for that are not going to be submitted to your college. But it will give you an idea of what it's like to take a test and where you're at. That will give you somewhat of an idea of where you should be a year from then. So I think a year is a good timeline to start early enough because once you take your PSATs, you know where you're at and then you can start preparing yourself. If you start too early, you get into, you get to a point where you've reached your saturation point and then you don't want to stay there anymore, so you start dipping. And for that reason, perhaps you shouldn't be starting too early. So maybe if you're a freshman, it may not be the best time to start. Maybe you should start thinking about it, but perhaps start taking review courses might not be the best way to go. That is for you to decide, and those are things you may want to discuss with someone who can offer you advice on who you personally are and how you approach things in life generally. And for that, maybe you might want to talk to your parents. You might want to talk to someone who actually does this for a living, such as your guidance counselor. And they might be able to tell you what's the best approach to take and what opportunities are offered within your school to be able to prepare for this and when you should be preparing for this. One of the best ways to prepare, and this I'm sure you've heard from a lot of people, is practice, practice, practice. Take sample tests from all of these study guides and focus on your difficult areas. Focusing on, if you're good at something, you're always going to be good at that, but don't forget to focus on what you're not good at because that is going to count as part of your score. So I know it might be hard sometimes to just go back and work on that section. For example, for me personally, reading was one of the hardest sections. I know, ironic considering I'm a lawyer now and I read a lot, but reading was one of the hardest sections for me. And I never wanted to work on that section, but it was a big part of getting a good score on these tests. So you do have to focus on that. Math was my strong section, so I actually spent considerably less time on the math section and more time on the reading section. But again, don't neglect what you think is your strong section. So just because I thought math was my strong section does not mean I stopped taking mock tests for the math section as well. I want to make sure I am as strong as I think I am on that section come the test day. And finally, time yourself. That is very important in standardized testing. If you don't time yourself, you will find yourself in a bit of a clutch when you are in that test room. So time yourself. If you can't do it, have someone sit with you and time you, and when they ask you to stop, you got to stop. Can we go on to the next slide, please?
We're on slide 8 now.
Thank you. Smart test taking. Be a smart test taker. Don't just rely on what you've been doing, but be smart when you are actually in that test room. So what do I mean by being a smart test taker? What is smart test taking? Should I guess or should I not guess? When you're in that test room, only you can make that decision for yourself, whether you should be guessing or you shouldn't be guessing. But here are some tricks, or here are some things to think about when you're deciding whether you should guess or you shouldn't guess. As I've mentioned before, some tests do penalize you for getting an answer wrong. So if they're penalizing you, perhaps that is not the best question that you should be guessing on. Unless, let's say it's not that you don't know any of the answers, but that you're stuck on 2 answers. Let's say you're stuck on 2 of the 4 choices that you're given. How do you choose between those 2 choices? Should you guess at that point? If you are completely unsure between those 2 choices, maybe you should leave that blank. But if you're down to 2 choices and you're leaning towards one as opposed to another, then yes, go ahead and guess. Because a lot of times your instincts are correct. If you're completely unsure, don't guess. But if you are leaning towards an answer, I would guess. Perhaps that's not you, and that's what I'm saying. That's something that you have to decide when you are in that test room. If there are no points deducted on your test, like for example, when I took the ACTs, there was no penalized testing. I went ahead and filled every single bubble. Fill out every single bubble. Guess your way through that test. Well, don't guess your way through that test, but guess your way through whatever questions you don't really know, because you may or may not get points for that. But at least you won't be penalized if it's a wrong answer. So, if you are doing that, I would say stick with one bubble. Just pick a bubble and stick with that for all of the questions that you are completely unsure about. So just pick B all the way through, or just pick C all the way through. Again, if you are at that point where you have 2 answers, then don't just pick like C, then pick the answer that you think is correct. But if you're completely unsure on some questions, just pick one bubble, because then you have the best chance of getting the most of them correct. The second thing to do in order to be a smart tester is process of elimination. This is where you are not looking for a correct answer, but you have no idea what the correct answer is. So now you're starting to strike out all of the answers that are the wrong answers. So maybe you're not sure which the correct answer is, but you definitely know that 2 of these 4 are the wrong answers. So you strike those 2 out, and now you have to just pick between the remaining 2 answers. Or sometimes you can strike 3 of them out, and then the one you remain with is your correct answer. That's process of elimination. So you don't know which is the right answer, but you know which are the wrong answers. So you're not choosing the wrong answers, and the one you're left with is the one that you go with. Time management. Do not waste too much time on one question. A lot of times people start spending a lot of time on one question, and you are losing that time on that you could be spending on the remaining questions. And all of the questions are going to be graded equally. So it doesn't matter that you spend more time on one question. If you are not able to spend as much time on these other questions, you're just going to lose out on those. So, and because you time section-wise, it's not like you can just spend less time on a math section and then devote all that time on like a reading section or anything like that. So just make sure if you're spending too much time on one question, skip it, and then you have time to come back to it. If you're unsure, it's just not worth spending that much time on that question. You just have to come back on it. And the final thing to do is be decisive. Once you decide I'm skipping this question, you're skipping that question. Don't really ponder over whether you should go back or not, because if you do that, you're not going to be able to concentrate on the remaining questions. So be decisive, and be confident. Once you pick an answer, be confident in your answer. And just, if you think an answer is right, be decisive and pick that answer and move on to the next question. Please move on to the next slide.
We're on slide 9.
Okay. But through the standardized testing, don't forget to enjoy high school. When you get to college, it's going to be very hard. So try to enjoy high school as much as you can. But don't forget about a lot of other things that you're going to have to do in high school in order to be able to get to a point where you can get into a really good college. So what do you do apart from enjoying high school? And how do you enjoy high school while still being able to prepare for college and for your career ahead? So one of the things is AP classes. What AP classes do you have to take? Now, that's what I mean when I said non-mandatory tests. AP exams that you take are not tests that you have to take, but that you choose to take so that you don't have to take those classes when you're in college. That's not to this thing where you're taking AP classes because your friends are taking. Don't do that. If you're not interested in a class, do not take that AP class, because you will find AP classes are just are actually harder than the regular class that you're taking for that particular subject. And if you're not interested in that subject, you're never going to have fun in that AP class, and you're probably not going to do as well on your AP exam. So either develop an interest in that subject or try to take a class that you are interested in. But don't just take a class only because you're being interested in a particular subject is obviously the most important. But also think about whether that class is going to benefit you or not. For example, I took AP statistics in high school in my senior year when I was in 12th grade. I had already applied for colleges at that point. I was accepted into the college that I eventually ended up going to. And I found out I had accepted my offer from them as well. And I found out that they don't accept any credits for AP statistics. So it doesn't matter whether I would have gotten a 3 on the AP exam, a 4 or a 5. Whatever credits I would have gotten for my AP stats would not have gone towards my credits that I was getting in college. So at that point, how does it really benefit me to keep working on that AP exam? So I spent very less time studying for my AP stats exam, and I spent a lot more time studying for my AP calculus and my AP physics exam, because those were classes that would be counted and I would get credit for that in college. And so it just made more sense to concentrate on those classes as opposed to AP stats. But if you are a sophomore, as my sister was when she was taking AP stats, then you may want to concentrate on your AP class because you don't know at that point what college you're going to be going to. And those credits may benefit you later. So it's like this balance. Not only should you be interested in that subject, but also are you going to benefit from taking that AP class? And don't feel obligated to take every AP class that is offered under the sun. The other thing you have to do is take extracurricular activities. I was on math team. I was on academic decathlon. And those were things that I was interested in. I was also part of Indian Students Association, and that allowed me to be part of their cultural programs and stuff like that. I had people who were part of I had friends who were part of Science Olympiad, friends who were part of Amnesty International. It just depends on what you're interested in. I even had friends who were in like a cooking club or something. So it just really depends on what you find interesting. But I was also on track. Just find things that you're interested in. But do try to find extracurricular activities that you're interested in, because you can put that on your resume. And when you when a college sees the kind of extracurricular activities that you're interested in and that you're part of, they are going to be more likely to make you an offer. So if you're they want to see that you're active outside of just your classwork. Apart from OT classes and extracurricular activities, how else do you prepare for college? Well, so there are, if you're interested in going into medical school or law school, there are, you should probably look into a bunch of direct programs. A lot of colleges offer a direct program into medical school, law school, pharmacy school, so that, once you're done with your undergrad, you directly move on to whatever program that they're offering for med school or law school or whatever else it is. You may have certain requirements that you have to meet for that direct program, and you would want to look into that as well. You may want to go talk to like the colleges that are offering this, their admissions. You may want to go talk to their admissions office and find out what it is that you can do to get into their direct program. And again, the proactive approach goes here as well. Be proactive in your approach. If you already know you're interested in medical school or law school, take this approach early enough so that you will know what you need to get on your standardized tests to be able to get into that college and into their direct program. The other thing is, what if you don't know whether you want to go into a direct program? What if you're undecided? What if you don't know whether you want to go into engineering or law or something else? Don't worry. There are a lot of people just like you. There are a lot of undecided people. You don't have to feel obligated to definitely pick a major right when you're going into college. You could be undecided. But if you are undecided, then you should pick a college that offers multiple different choices. So, for example, there are a lot of good state schools that offer a lot of different choices, but also have direct programs as well. So perhaps you might want to look into some of those. Again, please speak with your guidance counselor and please speak with admissions office at these different colleges, because they might definitely be able to help you more. Finally, remember, there is nothing wrong with changing your major later. I actually did that. And I'm at a very good point in life, and I think of myself as very successful. Well, I don't know very successful, but I think I am at a good point in life. So just if you as we'll go through the rest of these slides, you will see I took a lot of different directions in life and changed my major, and there is really nothing wrong with changing your major later. So you could pick one major right now, go to a school, and then decide you don't want to do that, and that's absolutely okay. So don't be afraid of picking a major right now and changing it later, or feeling that you're stuck with a certain major just because you picked it. That is absolutely not true. Can we move to the next slide, please?
We're on slide 10 now.
So where did I end up going to college? I went to Illinois Institute of Technology. That is just a little bit south of Chicago, and it's right across the White Sox Stadium. If you don't know who White Sox are, they're a baseball team in Chicago. And that's where I spent 4 of my best years at Illinois Institute of Technology. I love my time at IIT. But it was not easy. It's a tech school, it's very hard, and there's a lot expected out of you. Some of the organizations that I was part of when I was at IIT was IEEE, that's Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineer, and something completely different was Indian Students Association. I was a cultural secretary and then a secretary for Indian Students Association, and I was part of organizing a lot of very successful events that we had at Illinois Institute of Technology. And I think that was a good outlet for me to work on my passions other than just the engineering work that I was doing at IIT. But when I went to IIT, I eventually graduated with a degree in electrical engineering. But when I applied to IIT, I actually applied for a major in computer engineering. After the first year, though, I just realized how miserable I was doing a lot of software work. And if you can't do software, you pretty much cannot be a computer engineer. And I realized very early on that I was actually interested in circuits a lot more than I was interested in coding. So I really wanted to just do electrical engineering, and I switched my major. Now, it may seem like computer engineering to electrical engineering is not that much of a change, but I've had friends who went from electrical engineering to then going into med school who did something completely different. So trust me, you can change your major even once you are in college. Can we move to the next slide, please?
We're on 11?
Yes, please. Okay. So slide 11. Coping in college. If you think college is going to be easy, you're wrong. College is very hard. Is college fun? Yes, it is, but it's also very, very hard. So how do you cope in college? And the things I have here on this slide are not just for college. If you end up going into grad school, these are applicable to grad school as well. So how do you cope in college with, because it's going to get like a lot harder exponentially from when you were in high school. First of all, you're not going to be spoon-fed. So you are going to be responsible for attending your classes on your own. No one is going to keep in attendance. You're going to be responsible for studying, doing your homework, all of that on your own. No one is going to call your parents and be like, your kid did not do their homework. You are going to be responsible. You're an adult at this point. You have to work on this on your own. So how do you cope in college? Because it's going to be a great transition from high school, like a difficult transition from high school, I should say. But it is a lot of fun if you do a couple of things. First of all, form a study group. It is so important that you study with people. If you try to study by yourself in college, it's just not going to work. You are going to get stuck at some point during your college career, and it's always better to have friends who are taking the same classes as you, who know how you study, and who you can talk to when you're stuck at a certain point in any of your classes or in lab or anything else. You need to form a study group. The next thing you can do is, let's say no one in your study group really knows an answer to a particular problem. What do you do then? You can go talk to your professor, or many colleges have tutors that they, usually these tutors are like upperclassmen. So they're, if you're a freshman, they're probably seniors, and they're tutoring for math or science or whatever else it is. And you can get help during those tutoring hours. We had one at Illinois Institute of Technology. I'm sure most colleges offer that. The third thing is, like I said, go talk to your professor. But in order to be able, even if you don't know your professor, you could go talk to your professor, but it's always nice to know your professor. And a lot of times you'll find that they could be great mentors to you, because who knows, they may have taken a path similar to what you might go on to do in your life. Or maybe you're inspired by what they're doing and you want to do something different from what you were thinking you wanted to do. Finally, if you don't know something, ask questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions while you're in class. If you don't understand something, ask a question right away, because the more you wait, the worse it's going to get, because college classes go on a lot faster than high school classes. So if you don't ask a question right away, you will find yourself not understanding anything in the next class. Next slide, please.
We're on 12.
Okay, so what did I do after college? I have been saying I took a lot of different directions in life, and the next couple of slides actually go on to show what I did after I graduated from IIT. So right after I graduated, I actually ended up taking more standardized tests. I took this exam called Fundamentals of Engineering, which is one of the exams that you're required to take in order to be able to get a PE license. A PE license is a professional engineer license. That is almost like getting an MBA for business people or something like that. So if you're an engineer and you have a PE license, that's really up there. You suddenly start moving up the ladder. But in order to get the PE license, you have to be able to work. You have to be working for a couple of years, and you have to have graduated from a 4-year accredited college with an engineering degree. And you have had to take Fundamentals of Engineering exam. So I ended up taking Fundamentals of Engineering exam right after college. Before I could take my PE exam, though, I actually had to work. So I started working at Motorola, and I worked at Motorola for about 2.5 years or so, about 2.5 to 3 years. I enjoyed my time at Motorola a lot, but within a year or so, I was finding myself pretty much, I was finding that my work was getting a little too tedious, and I did not want to forget about another passion I had in life. And you need these kind of outlets when you're working. You need some sort of a balance between work and your personal life. In my personal life, what I really enjoyed doing was dancing. So I had been trained in Indian classical dancing when I was in Dubai. For about 8 years, I had trained in Indian classical dance style of Bharatanatyam. And once we moved to America, though, I actually stopped dancing because, like I said, it was a big cultural difference. There was a lot that I had to really work on. For example, these different type of exams that I had to take, extracurricular activities, making new friends, adjusting to the new culture here. And so I didn't really get a chance. And then I went to college, which again, I said was very hard. So I didn't really get a chance to pursue a graduation in classical dancing. So what I did end up doing was I went back and I found a teacher who could train me again after I was done with college. This again shows you it's never too late to pursue your passions. If you're interested in something, you can do that at any time. So I went back, I was in class, and pretty much all of the other girls that I was taking these classes with were probably in 4th or 5th grade or 6th grade, and I was working. So yes, I was older, but it was something I enjoyed doing. And about 2 years later, while I was still working at Motorola, I did my Arangetram. In case you guys don't know what an arangetam is, that is like a dance graduation event, apparently, where the person graduating has to dance in front of a live audience for about 3 hours. And there are 7 to 8 dances that you do that sort of show your skills in different with through all of those different dances. Preparing for that arangetam, for that dance recital, is a very, very, very hard and difficult thing to do. I actually you at an average have to spend 2 to 3 hours each day training for that dance recital for about 3 or 4 months at least. How was I doing that with work? I would go to work from 8 in the morning to 5, drive to my teacher's studio and dance for another 3 hours, and then finally come back home. How are you able to do that? You can only maintain this balance if you have dedication and passion. Passion is very, very important, but also there has to be some sort of a dedication, which I really wanted to do, and your willingness to work hard. If I wouldn't have worked hard towards achieving this, I would have never been able to get to that point where I was able to graduate and have that diploma in my hand. It was very successful, and as you can see here, I was also featured in one of the newspapers. So I like to think that I ended up doing a good job. Can we please move on to the next slide?
Run 13.
Yes. So yes, I was at Motorola. So how did I get from engineering to law? As I was saying before, one of the reasons I worked on my R&D program was because, I felt like I was getting too pulled into my work, and I didn't really have time for anything else. Over the course of 2.5 years, I started noticing that, and the kind of work I was doing at Motorola was becoming a little tedious for me. I was doing the same kind of work. Yes, it was different projects, but I wasn't really learning anything new, which was really the goal of why I wanted to go into engineering in the first place. I felt like I wasn't part of inventing anything or creating anything new. And so I decided I didn't want to do engineering anymore. Or I shouldn't say I didn't want to do engineering anymore, but I decided I was not going to work at Motorola. I wanted to take a completely different path. And I actually started my own dance troupe for a little while there. While I was doing that, it was somewhat successful, but it's very hard to actually start your own business. And you realize early on that maybe just doing that alone is not the best way to go about it. So I started doing that a little bit on the side, but I also wanted to, and I was thinking about what else I wanted to do in life. So a lot of my friends at that point had started going into MBA. They were going into management schools to get their MBA degrees, and I sort of looked into that, but I wasn't really feeling that management was my thing. So I really wanted to be sure that's what I wanted to do before I actually just applied for an MBA program and decided to go to school. So I took this course at University of Illinois at Chicago, UIC, and that course was called Engineering Management and Law Certification Program. So I had a couple of management classes that were being offered for engineers and a couple of law classes that are being offered for engineers. And you may think, why are law classes being offered for engineers? Well, when engineers invent certain things, they want to get a patent on it. What is a patent? Getting a patent on something is when you invent something and you don't want someone else to steal your idea or make something else. And you sort of want a monopoly because you're the first one who came up with an idea. So for example, Apple may create a phone and they don't want Samsung to steal it. Apple would go ahead and get a patent on a particular technology. But in order to get that patent, they first have to go through an examination process. In, um, in order to go through that examination process, they have to draft an application which discusses in detail what their invention is. And they have to describe their invention in words. Now, if you're an engineer, you realize you don't really have to write, or describe things a lot. You just make things. You hardly have to describe it in terms of like, this is the feature, this is how you place them together. You hardly ever do that. That's where you need lawyers. Lawyers who are proficient not only with words, but lawyers who would understand your technology. So lawyers who would need a technical background. That is patent law. That is what I do right now. And that was, and for engineers to be able to understand what patent law is, this was an engineering law course that was being offered. Once I took that course, I realized that I really was interested in patent law a lot more than I was interested in any sort of management class. So I started applying to different law schools. But in order to apply to law schools, what do I have to do? Yes, even more testing. I had to take the LSATs, another standardized test. Again, like I had mentioned before, a lot of people end up taking classes for LSATs. I personally did not do that, but I spent a lot of time, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot of time working through those study guides and timing myself and pretty much taking all tests that were available to me. I did eventually get a good score on the LSATs. I ended up going to Marquette University Law School, which is in Milwaukee. And there I concentrated on patent law, again, which needs a mandatory technical background, which I had. And I wanted to do something with my engineering background as well. So patent law worked out perfectly for me. Can we please move on to the next slide?
We're on 14.
At law school, I think I really enjoyed my time at Marquette University Law School. The picture you see here, that is this new building that had just opened up the year that I started law school at Marquette University. That's my law building. That was pretty much home to me for 3 years that I was in law school. So I'm glad it was beautiful. But again, at law school, some of the things I'd mentioned before, I was part of a study group. I got to know my professors. Actually, I had learned from what I didn't really do as well while I was in college. And I made much more of an effort of actually getting to know my professors a lot better face to face, so that they would know my name, and I wasn't just visiting them when I had a question, but I was talking to them outside of just classwork as well. Doing so helped me a lot because I became a research assistant for one of my professors who was a mentor to me. She was also my patent law professor. And as part of her research team, I got to be part of drafting a Supreme Court amicus brief on a gene patentability case that the Supreme Court had oral arguments coming up for. I also got a comment published in their law journal, and my comment was based on the Apple versus Samsung case. If in case you haven't heard about it, you could go look it up. It's pretty famous. Apple sued Samsung for a bunch of things that they thought Samsung was infringing them, or infringing in that they thought Samsung was copying from Apple. One other thing that I did at Marquette University Law School is take even more tests. So I actually ended up taking 3 exams as part of law school. One was the MPRE, that's the ethics exam that all lawyers have to take regardless of what kind of law you're practicing, and that's nationwide. I ended up taking the Minnesota State Bar exam, and I also took the patent bar exam. And of all of the standardized tests that I've taken, the Minnesota State Bar exam and the patent bar exam were two exams that I actually did take a study course for. But when I was taking my Minnesota State Bar exam, I was already offered a position by the firm that I'm with right now, and they were actually paying for my course, so it kind of worked out well. I think if you ever are at that point, it's always nice to have your firm or your company pay for whatever exam that you want to take, because these courses are very expensive. And yes, they do help. I did pass my Minnesota State Bar exam and stuff, but they're expensive, so it's always nice if your firm is paying for you. Next slide, please.
We're on 15.
And that pretty much brings me to the end of my presentation here. We started out with there are more than just one direction. That was pretty much a pun for all of you young millennial girls, because I know you may be a lot into one direction these days, but just know there's more to life than just one direction. There are many directions that you can take. So be a creator of your own path. Don't just, as you may have found from my presentation here, my journey was anything but something anything that was different from anything that my friends had taken. My friends ended up, continuing on working in an engineering firm, and then they went on to, go into like a management. They went to management school, got their MBA degrees, and have some good positions at companies that they work for. That was just not me. A lot of my friends were they either grew up here or they came to the United States when they were starting college. Again, that wasn't me. I started when I was smack in the middle of my teenage years. I had picked my life up. Well, my family we picked up our life from Dubai and moved all the way here. It was a very hard adjustment, but you just get through it. You tell yourself that I'm going to be able to do it, and you are. So even after college, I didn't stick with engineering. I chose something completely different. Like I decided to open up my own dance troupe, and then I went to law school. And in law school, I ended up going into patent law, which again, a lot of women these days hardly ever end up going into a technical school, engineering school, let alone then end up going into law school. There are not even that many female lawyers. So to have a female attorney, female intellectual property attorney, that's a pretty big deal. I'm actually the only female attorney in my firm right now. So, but I feel like I'm at a good point in life. So you may feel like you are stuck in a career, but that's not true. You can always choose to do what you want to with your life and create your own path, and still get to a successful point. Next slide, please.
I'm on 16.
Okay, this is just a quote that I thought really would go with everything that I have here, and that I think I found useful for, to get me through difficult points in my life. So that's about it. I don't really have much else. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask me. I know this presentation went on a little bit longer than I expected it to, but as you can see, my journey was pretty unconventional, so it took a little bit longer to get through all of that.
Thank you, Neha. Before we move on to questions, I'd just like to say that our next speaker for the series is going to be Dr. Nancy Gutierrez, and she is the Chief Strategy Officer for New York City Leadership Academy. And we can actually open it up for questions. We have about 5 minutes if anyone has any questions for Neha. So Neha, I don't know if you can see this on the comments board, but
it's how did your family friends handle the news of switching from engineering to law? Were they supportive? Yes, actually, they were very supportive. My mom had a little bit of actually my mom was the one who inspired me to do something different, even if it wasn't engineering. She was pretty supportive. My dad had a bit of a more difficult time, even though he's always been very supportive. He's an engineer, so he just didn't see how law fit into this engineering aspect of things. But again, I didn't just switch from engineering to go into law school. I still use my engineering background a lot. My friends actually were pretty supportive. They all work for these big companies. So at some point, I think they would want me to go and work with them. They're all engineers and I'm a patent lawyer. So if they make any inventions, I can always help them protect it. So they were pretty supportive. And my sister was very supportive as well. My sister and I were roommates at Marquette University for about 3 years while I was there. So sometimes even if they're not supportive, I think my parents were pretty supportive. They always have been, and my sister was pretty supportive as well. But I think if you just explain to them what your rationale is and really have a good idea of why you are doing this. Like I said, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go into management or law. So I really wanted to do some research before I just took that plunge. And that's why I ended up going to UIC and took that course for engineering management and law. And once I had that, I really had a clear understanding of why I wanted to do that. And so it was easy for me to explain to anyone who asked me why I was making that switch. Any other questions? Oh, give me just a second here. Do you have any advice for coping with male-dominated fields? Yes. It will take. You will have to work a little bit harder to cope up with a male. When you're in a male-dominated field, that's just the way it is. But don't be discouraged by it. If you have to work a little bit harder, you just have to work a little bit harder. But that's your opportunity to prove that you are just as good as any of the other male members who are working in that field, right? And a lot of times, if you feel that you're being sidelined or you're not being asked enough questions or you are not being consulted enough because you're a female, try to speak up. If you don't speak up, they're never going to find out. And when I say try to speak up, I mean, don't be rude about it, but be firm about it. So, try to ask for more opportunities that will allow you to display your skills and what you can do despite of being a female. Or, so because both of my bosses are males as well, like they're both, so sometimes it does get a little bit hard. And when we have these attorney meetings or something like that, if I have come across something that I want to talk about, I go up to my boss and I let him know that this is a difficulty that I have, and I think this would be something good that we should include in our attorney meeting. And a lot of times you will realize they're not really being sexist intentionally. they are just being that way because that's how the whole field has been. So when you are firm about something that you want to talk about, or firm about something that you want to do, they're going to be more than supportive. It's just that you have to, it is your, you will have to take that proactive approach that I was talking about earlier, and take that create that opportunity rather than take that opportunity to be able to display your skills. And one other thing I will say is, don't be afraid of a more male-dominated field. Someone has to take that first step and be inspiring for all of the other women who will come after them. So be a leader, take that first step. Any other questions?
Well, thank you again, Neha. Those were some great, points that you brought up. Really inspiring. We have gone a little bit over time, so I think we'll call it a day for right now. Once again, our next speaker for the speaker series is Dr. Nancy Gutierrez, and please join us next month for a very inspiring talk by her. She is the chief strategist. She is the chief strategy officer for New York City Leadership Academy, which is quite fitting with the last words that Neha told us, that we should all strive to be leaders. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon, and I hope you all have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.